Have you ever wondered, what if everything you've been taught about death, not metaphorically, not poetically, I mean literal, all those stories about heaven and hell, final judgment, pearly gates, or eternal voids, what if they weren't told to enlighten you, but to keep you obedient while alive? You were never meant to fear death, but you were taught. From the moment you could understand, and with fear came control. But what if one man, one of the greatest minds to ever walk this planet, discovered something that shattered that fear completely? Something so profound that even now science still dares not speak aloud. His name? Nikola Tesla. You know him as the genius who gave us alternating current, but you don't know what he discovered about death. In the spring of 1930, Tesla whispered truths that science still dares not speak aloud. He didn't say, "I believe the soul exists." He said, "I know." And he paid the price for that certainty. For 102 years, his most dangerous revelations stayed hidden in an archived interview stamped, "Do not publish until humanity is ready." Well, maybe that time is now. Because if what he saw is real, then death is not the end. It's not even the beginning. It's a frequency shift, a retuning. And the real question is, are you tuned enough to receive? If you've ever felt like something about this world doesn't quite add up, if you've ever sensed that you're more than flesh, more than matter, then this message is for you. Because once you hear what Tesla revealed, you'll never fear.
If you're still here, still listening, that means this message didn't just find you by accident. It found you because some part of you has always known that there's more to life than what we're told, and more to death than silence. You felt it in quiet moments, in the space between thoughts, in the way certain words stir something ancient inside you. That's not imagination. That's memory, the kind of memory that lives in the soul, not in the mind. So I want to ask you to do just one thing. If even a single part of this feels true, if it resonates like a familiar song you forgot you knew, don't let it slip away. Pause for a moment, breathe, and share this message with someone who might be ready to remember too. Not because I need more views, but because this world needs more light. And sometimes, remembering who you are begins by helping someone else do the same. So subscribe if you haven't. Not to follow me, but to stay connected to what you just started awakening inside yourself. And leave a comment if something stirred. One word is enough. I remembered. Because when even one person remembers, the silence begins to break, and everything changes. There are some truths so powerful, they're not denied, they're buried. In the spring of 1930, in a quiet room tucked away in New York City, Nikola Tesla sat down for an interview unlike any he had ever given. No talk of alternating current, no grand inventions. This wasn't about machines. It was about the soul. He spoke not as a scientist trying to prove something, but as a man who had seen and remembered. The pages of that interview were never published, not in newspapers, not in books. They were locked away in a private archive, stamped with 7 chilling words, "Do not publish until humanity is ready." For over a century they stayed hidden, filed between technical blueprints and patents. But the content wasn't technical at all. Tesla didn't talk about volts or circuits. He talked about what happens after the heart stops beating.
He said death wasn't an ending, but a frequency shift, that the soul is energy, and like all energy, it cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And he wasn't speaking in metaphors. He described seeing the soul leave the body, not in a dream, but during a real experiment with magnetic fields. He called it a field interaction. Not religion, not superstition, physics waiting to be understood. Tesla said, "I do not believe, I know." And that knowing came at a cost. Because when a man of science speaks the language of the soul, he doesn't just challenge religion, he threatens the entire architecture of control. Imagine this. What if the world's most brilliant mind claimed the soul was measurable, the death was not a deletion, but a transmission? Who benefits from keeping that quiet? Think about it. If we no longer fear death, if we truly understood that consciousness continues, how could anyone use fear to govern us? And that's exactly why this interview was silenced. Not discredited, not destroyed, just forgotten. Tucked away in time, waiting for someone brave enough to ask, why was this buried? But now those words have resurfaced, and with them, a new question rises. What did Tesla really see that shook the foundations of power? And that's what we'll uncover next, because when we understand how Tesla saw the soul, not as poetry, but as physics, we start to remember something deeper than belief. We begin to feel the signal. And if you listen closely, you might already be hearing it.
There's a moment in every life when belief isn't enough anymore. When the stories you were raised on, the ones about heaven, judgment, endings, start to feel too small for what you felt inside. That was the moment Tesla reached. But he didn't stop at belief. He crossed over into something deeper. When asked whether he believed in life after death, Tesla didn't hesitate. He didn't say, "I think so." He didn't say, "I hope so." He said, "Believe? No, I know." And those three words, so simple, so certain, carry a weight that most of us spend a lifetime avoiding. You see, belief is easy. It's safe. It gives us comfort without requiring confirmation. But knowing, that changes everything. Because once you know, you can't unknow. Tesla's knowing didn't come from dogma or doctrine. It came from experience. He had seen things, felt things that went beyond logic. He had witnessed the body as vessel and the soul as signal. In his journals, he spoke of the soul as a real field of energy, something that vibrates, moves, interacts, just like light, just like sound, just like electricity. He wrote, "What we call the soul is the source code of the self. Not fantasy, not faith. Physics we haven't yet understood." This wasn't poetry. It was observation. Think about it. We measure invisible forces every day. Wi-Fi, magnetism, radiation, they're all unseen until we build the tools to detect them. So why should consciousness be any different? Tesla believed that if we stopped being afraid of the invisible, science would finally begin to evolve, not outward into more machines, but inward into more meaning. He wasn't interested in worshiping mystery. He wanted to understand it. And here's the lesson in that. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is stop asking for permission to believe and start learning how to remember what you already know. Because when knowing replaces belief, something incredible happens inside you.
Your fear starts to dissolve, your questions get quieter, and your presence, your energy, begins to speak louder than words. That's what Tesla tapped into. Not a new religion, a new relationship with truth. And it was this shift in consciousness, from blind faith to lived awareness, that became the foundation for his most hidden experiments. Because if the soul is real, and not just a metaphor, then we should be able to detect it. And that's exactly what Tesla set out to do next.
If you could see the soul, not as a glow, not as a ghost, but as a frequency, would you still call it spiritual? Or would you finally call it natural? That's how Tesla saw it, not as something mystical, but something measurable, something we simply didn't have the tools to detect. Yet. He believed the soul wasn't some poetic invention of religion. He called it an energetic field, a signature vibration that radiates from every living being, not metaphorically, literally. Just like every radio station broadcasts its own signal, every soul, he said, broadcasts its own frequency. And when the body dies, the signal doesn't stop, it simply shifts. Tesla once wrote, "What we call matter is simply light slowed down enough to be seen, and light itself is a vibration of consciousness." Now pause for a second. Let that sink in. If matter is compressed light, and light is consciousness vibrating, then your body is not who you are. It's just the current form your energy is expressing through. You are not a body with a soul. You are a soul temporarily using a body. And that changes everything. It's the same reason why you can walk into a room and immediately feel the energy has shifted, why you feel at peace near one person and drained near another. That's not just personality. That's frequency. It's why animals react to people who seem perfectly normal, why babies cry in the arms of someone who's smiling but disconnected inside. We're all tuning forks, and whether we realize it or not, we're always picking up on the signal. Tesla believed that one day science would evolve beyond microscopes and move toward resonance detectors, devices not to measure size, but to measure presence, not what something is made of, but what it feels like. He wasn't alone in this. Today, scientists in fields like quantum biology and biophotonics are beginning to ask the same question. What if consciousness is not produced by the brain, but transmitted through it, like a radio plays music? And if that's true, then death isn't the radio breaking, it's just the signal moving to a different channel. The body ends, the music plays on. And here's the lesson. Maybe your soul isn't something to be proven, but something to be tuned. Because once you begin living in alignment with your own frequency, your truth, your presence, your intention, you stop needing belief. You start becoming the signal itself. And that's where Tesla's next revelation begins. Because once he saw the soul as energy, he asked the one question no one else dared to ask. What happens to that energy the very moment it leaves the body? And that led him to his most controversial experiment of all.
If the soul is a frequency, then the next logical question is simple, but bold. Can we hear it? Not with our ears, not like a voice whispering from a corner, but through resonance, the subtle echoes left behind when a soul departs the body. Nikola Tesla believed we could, and so, in the silence of his private lab, he began designing a device he would never reveal publicly. He called it the echo catcher. But it wasn't about sound, it was about vibration. You see, Tesla understood that everything leaves an imprint, not just in memory, but in the field around us. And he believed the soul was no different. The echo catcher was said to use a series of tuned coils, electromagnetic amplifiers, and conductive chambers, designed not to record a voice, but to capture the energetic signature of a soul leaving the body. He claimed that in the moments following death, a shift occurs in the electromagnetic resonance of the room. The air gets heavier, the temperature drops, and something changes, not just emotionally, physically. Tesla described it like this: when the body falls silent, the field speaks, not with words, but with presence. In one experiment, after the passing of a small bird he had nursed back to health, he said the instrument spiked for almost 30 seconds. No external stimulus, no machinery fault, just a silent release of energy. He didn't call it a ghost, he called it a departure curve, the echo of consciousness, vibrating just beyond the reach of language. Now, some will say that sounds like fiction, and maybe that's what we've been trained to think. But here's the strange part. Modern-day researchers in the fields of parapsychology and quantum sensing have begun picking up on similar anomalies: electrical fluctuations, magnetic surges, temperature shifts, all occurring in the presence of death or deep emotional transitions. It's as if something lingers, not forever, but long enough to be felt if you're quiet enough to notice. And that brings us to a deeper realization. Maybe we've been listening with the wrong instruments. Maybe the real echo catcher isn't a machine at all. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's your own sensitivity, your ability to feel presence, to sense energy, to detect that subtle change when someone you love walks into a room or walks out of this world. Tesla's device may never be reconstructed, but the principle he believed in is more alive than ever. That death isn't silence, it's signal. And every soul leaves a trace. And once you've felt that trace, even once, you never forget it, because that's what makes us more than flesh and memory. It's what leads us to Tesla's next and most mysterious observation. What if those echoes aren't just remnants? What if they still speak, not to haunt us, but to remind us we were never truly alone?
Some experiences are so vivid, so undeniable, they leave no room for belief, only knowing. Nikola Tesla had one of those moments. It happened during a long, solitary experiment in his Manhattan lab. He had been working for days, barely sleeping, barely eating, calibrating a machine designed to amplify electromagnetic resonance. And then something happened. In the middle of tuning the frequency, he felt his body go completely still, but his awareness didn't fade. It expanded. He described it like this: "My body remained in the room, but I drifted above it, then beyond it. I floated over the rooftops, across the streets of Manhattan, watching the people below with a clarity I have never known before." It wasn't a dream. He didn't fade into blackness or lose control. He said it felt more real than real, as if he had stepped out of the illusion and into the essence. Tesla observed neighborhoods he had never visited. He described street names, shop signs, faces, voices, all in perfect detail. Hours later, when he returned to his body, drenched in sweat and shaken but alert, he wrote down everything. Days afterwards, he walked those same streets on foot, and every detail matched exactly. The names,
the buildings, the people, even the conversation he heard between two strangers, verbatim. That was the moment Tesla stopped treating the soul as a theory. It became a fact. And here's what that experience taught him and can teach us too. We are not confined to our bodies. Awareness is not locked behind the eyes. It's more like light, projected through the lens of form, but never trapped by it. Tesla didn't call it astral travel. He didn't frame it in mystical language. He called it field displacement. To him, the body was a receiver, but not the source. And the soul? The soul was the signal. Now, think about this. How many of us have brushed against this same truth? A near-death moment, a lucid dream so real it left you shaken, a memory you couldn't have known, yet did. We dismiss these moments. We call them imagination, exhaustion, coincidence. But what if they're not? What if they are the echoes of our own untethered awareness, trying to remind us that who we are is far more than skin and name and story? Tesla's journey over Manhattan wasn't just a personal revelation. It was a glimpse into a bigger truth, that consciousness is mobile, that your essence is not limited by space or time. And that realization led him to a deeper understanding. If we can leave the body, then maybe death isn't departure, it's just distance. And if that's true, then maybe places too can remember. Because what Tesla discovered next was that consciousness doesn't just move, it leaves fingerprints. And sometimes the walls themselves remember.
Have you ever walked into a room and just felt something? Maybe it was a heaviness or a strange chill, like the air itself was holding its breath. Or maybe you felt sorrow, grief, before anyone even spoke a word. Nikola Tesla believed that wasn't coincidence. He believed you were feeling the memory of space. To him, space wasn't empty, it was alive. Not with spirits, not with ghosts, but with resonant energy. Every emotion, every thought, every act, they leave an imprint, like fingerprints on glass or echoes in a canyon. He called this the electrical memory of space, a field of subtle information woven into the very air we breathe. Tesla described it this way: what we think disappears does not vanish. It vibrates. It lingers. It becomes part of the invisible field surrounding all things. He believed that buildings absorb emotion, that objects retain intention, and that trauma, especially deep, repeated trauma, gets woven into the fabric of physical space. It's why battlefields still feel haunted long after the last shot is fired, why old hospitals feel cold even in summer, why some rooms in your childhood home still carry the echo of a single scream or secret. And it works the other way too. A church filled with centuries of quiet prayer, a room where someone laughed deeply every day, a garden planted with love, not for beauty, but for healing. You can feel that, even if you don't have the words for it. Tesla didn't romanticize this idea. He grounded it in physics. He believed space functions like a photographic plate, recording the vibrations of human consciousness and playing them back under certain conditions. He wasn't the only one. Modern experiments in cymatics,
Quantum field theory and even water memory studies have echoed the same possibility that space, like matter, is never truly neutral. It absorbs, it remembers. And here's the lesson. You're not just moving through space, you're leaving a trace. Every time you speak, every time you feel, you're sending a signal into the field. And that signal doesn't just disappear, it waits. Which begs a deeper question. If space can hold emotion, can it also replay it? Can it respond? Tesla thought so. He described moments in his lab when the air would grow dense just before an emotional breakthrough, or how a room where someone had suffered would disrupt the energy of his instruments for days. And that brings us to something more personal. Maybe the reason some places feel heavy is because they're still carrying what someone else couldn't let go of. And maybe, just maybe, we've been doing the same. But if space can remember pain, it can also remember peace. And the first step to shifting that memory is recognizing that your presence, your energy, can reprogram it. Because where memory lingers, so does music. And that leads us to the next key in Tesla's journey, the song of the soul, a vibration that never dies, just waits to be heard.
Not all music is heard with the ears. Some of it you feel. In the stillness after someone you love has left. In the quiet between words that never got to be spoken. In that strange warmth that washes over you when you think of someone who's no longer here, but somehow doesn't feel far. Nikola Tesla called it the music of the soul, but he wasn't speaking in metaphor. He believed that every soul emits a unique frequency, a living, pulsing signature, not in notes or melodies, but in energy. He wrote, "What we call spirit is a pattern, a vibration so subtle that most instruments cannot detect it, but the body can feel it." In other words, the soul has a song. And when the body dies, that song doesn't go silent, it lingers. Tesla spent years trying to build a device that could tune into that frequency, a kind of spiritual receiver, not to talk to the dead, but to feel the echo of their presence. He called it a resonance amplifier. It used thin copper wires, tuned coils, and antenna-like extensions. He didn't expect to hear voices. What he detected was sensation, a warmth in the air, a subtle vibration through the metal, a feeling like someone had just entered the room, but without footsteps. He described one moment in particular. A friend of his had passed. Days later, while working alone, he felt a sudden wave of clarity, followed by a tightening in the chest. Not pain, but recognition. No one was there, but he knew someone had been. And that moment sparked a question that stayed with him for the rest of his life. What if we've been trying to listen with the wrong sense? Not every song is meant to be heard. Some of it you feel. Like the hum of safety in a mother's embrace. Like the ache in your chest when you walk through a place that used to be full of laughter. This is what Tesla meant by music, not sound, presence. And once you realize that the soul doesn't disappear, but continues as vibration, you start to feel people differently. You stop asking, "Where did they go?" and start wondering, "What frequency are they now?" And here's the quiet truth. That frequency is still around you, maybe not always strong, but never gone. And it responds to something too, love. Tesla believed that love, true intentional love, was the most powerful tuning fork in the universe. It sharpens our perception, it softens our fear, and sometimes,
just sometimes, it lets us feel someone one last time. Not to haunt us, but to remind us they were real, and their presence still is. Because the music of the soul never dies. It just waits for someone still enough, open enough, to hear it. And that brings us to the moment when Tesla discovered just how strong that connection between souls could truly be, even across oceans, even across time, even across death.
Sometimes we feel someone before the phone rings. We know they're gone before anyone tells us. We dream of them the moment they take their last breath. Coincidence? Tesla didn't think so. To him, love wasn't just an emotion. It was an antenna, a vibrational link between souls that transcends time, space, and even death. He once shared a story that haunted him for the rest of his life. A dear friend of his had been ill, living far away, an ocean apart. No phone call, no telegram, no warning. And yet one quiet afternoon, Tesla collapsed. Out of nowhere. No explanation, just a sudden weakness in his body, followed by a wave of sadness so deep, he said it felt like the world turned off. Hours later, a letter arrived. His friend had passed at the exact moment he fell. Tesla didn't call it magic. He didn't call it psychic. He called it resonant transmission. He believed that when two souls are deeply bonded through love, care, shared energy, they remain connected like twin frequencies on a radio dial. And when one frequency ends its broadcast here, the other still picks it up. It's why we say things like, "I knew something was wrong," or "I just felt them with me." Because maybe you did. Tesla explained it like this: true love is not a feeling trapped in the chest. It is a wavelength shared between two beings that does not collapse when the body does. And that realization brings a quiet kind of comfort, because it means the people we've lost aren't really gone, not fully. Their energy, their signal, still whispers through the field. And love is what lets us hear it. It's the reason we still talk to those who've passed, even if we know they won't answer out loud. It's why a certain song, or scent, or photograph can bring them rushing back, like they never left. Because maybe they didn't. Maybe they're still here, not watching from above, but resonating through us. And here's the quiet truth Tesla knew. The deeper the love, the stronger the signal. So don't dismiss that sudden chill, that thought that came out of nowhere, that feeling in your chest when you stand where they once stood. That's not grief, that's connection. And love is how we remember. Because love never asks for proof. It just keeps reaching. It keeps listening. And sometimes, when the moment is just right, it hears something back. Which brings us to the next chapter in Tesla's exploration of the afterlife, a shared space, a threshold between worlds, a place where the living and the departed meet again, but not through seances, not through superstition, but through something far more mysterious and more real.
Some nights, we dream things we can't explain. Places we've never seen, yet feel familiar. People we've never met, yet somehow love. And sometimes, more strangely, we discover we weren't the only ones who had that dream.
Nikola Tesla believed that dreams were not just images the brain invents, but signals the soul receives. To him, dreams were more than sleep. They were bridges, places where the boundaries between this world and the next thin out, not disappear, but loosen. He called it the vibrational threshold, a liminal space where the living and the departed could meet, not with words, not with bodies, but with frequency. He described recurring dreams that haunted him for years, faces he had never seen in waking life, voices that spoke languages he did not know, yet stirred something ancient inside him. And here's the part that surprised even him. When he quietly shared these visions with others, he discovered they had seen the same thing, on the same night, in different parts of the world. He believed this was no accident. He wrote, "There is a field of consciousness beneath the visible, and dreams are the quiet crossing points." In that space, Tesla believed time bends, linear thought dissolves, and the soul, freed from the distractions of form, can wander, can remember, can reconnect. Modern neuroscience calls it coincidence, or perhaps collective unconscious, an idea Carl Jung explored deeply. But Tesla went one step further. He believed the shared dream space was not psychological, it was energetic. Like radio towers, each human emits a signal. And when those signals are harmonized through love, grief, memory, or longing, they begin to tune to the same frequency. And that's when something happens. Not imagined, but real. Have you ever dreamed of someone who had passed and woke up with tears you didn't cry in the dream, but carried with you all day? Or dreamt a conversation so specific, so vivid, that it felt more honest than anything you'd said while they were alive? Maybe that wasn't just closure. Maybe it was contact. Here's the quiet lesson. Just because something happens while you sleep doesn't mean it isn't real. In fact, maybe your most meaningful moments don't happen when you're awake. Maybe they happen when you're most open, when your ego sleeps, but your soul listens. Tesla never built a device to capture dreams, but he believed we already had one. It's called the heart, the quiet, vibrating core that continues listening even when the world stops speaking. And if love is the antenna and dreams are the channel, then grief may just be the signal reminding you you're still connected. And connection is the path to remembrance. Because what happens next in Tesla's journey isn't just about knowing the soul exists. It's about seeing your entire life from the inside out in one final illuminating moment.
What if, at the end of your life, you don't meet a judge? You meet a mirror. Nikola Tesla believed that the soul's journey doesn't end with death. Instead, it enters what he called the chamber of resonance, a place where everything you've ever said, done, or even thought plays back, but not as punishment, as clarity. He described it like this: when the soul leaves the body, it is not erased, it is revealed. In that moment, Tesla said, you don't face God, you face yourself. Not the version others saw, but the totality of who you've been. And you don't just review it, you feel it. Every word you spoke in anger, You feel it from the other person's heart. Every kindness you offered in silence, you feel it as light radiating back into you. He called this moment the soul's playback. Not a courtroom, a symphony. Imagine hearing your life as one complete song. Every note you played, every pause you left, every disharmony you created. Tesla believed this was the most sacred moment of the afterlife. Not because it condemned you, but because it showed you fully, without ego, without excuses. And here's where it gets terrifying. Not because of fire, but because of truth. He said, most are not judged, they are simply shown. And that is often far more humbling than any punishment. We often imagine the afterlife as reward or consequence. But what if it's just understanding? What if the most powerful force we face after death is not wrath, but reflection? This is the part no one wants to talk about, because it takes the power out of someone else's hands and puts it squarely in yours. And yet, there's also hope in it. Because Tesla didn't say this was about shame. He said it was about resonance. You feel what others felt because of you, not to suffer, but to remember. And from that remembering, you begin to refine, because you see where you built and where you broke, where you spoke life into others, and where your silence became a wound. And it's in that mirror, that moment of soul truth, that something extraordinary happens. You begin to choose, not from guilt, but from growth. Tesla believed that some souls, after seeing their full resonance, make a powerful decision to return, not because they failed, but because they have more to give, more light, more healing, more love that was withheld. And so begins the next phase of the journey, not a punishment, but a path, a return, not out of karma, but of calling.
We've been told that reincarnation is a cycle, a wheel we're trapped in, spinning lifetime after lifetime, paying for past mistakes. But Nikola Tesla didn't see it that way. To him, reincarnation wasn't a sentence, it was an invitation, a conscious return. He believed that after the soul passes through the mirror, the moment of complete self-reflection, it arrives at a crossroads. Some souls choose to move on, to dissolve into the greater field of light, to rest, to expand. But others feel something stirring, not regret, but unfinishedness, a lesson left incomplete, a love left unspoken, a thread still tugging on the heart. Tesla believed those souls don't come back out of punishment, but out of purpose. He wrote, "The awakened soul does not return to repeat. It returns to remember." To him, the earth wasn't a prison. It was a school. Each life a classroom. Each experience an answer to a deeper question the soul is asking. That's why some people are born with talents no one can explain. Why a child can play the piano at 3, or speak of wars they were never taught in school. It's why some feel instantly connected to strangers, or drawn to places they've never been. You've felt it, haven't you? That sense of déjà vu that goes deeper than memory. That knowing that comes not from learning, but from something buried in your bones. Tesla called it resonant recall. A subtle recognition that this isn't your first time here, and maybe not your last. But here's the catch. Not all returns lead to growth. Some souls get caught, not by a system, but by their own attachment. They come back chasing validation, fame, power, revenge. And in doing so, they forget the very reason they came. Tesla referred to this as the sleepwalk, a state of being alive but unaware, repeating patterns, reliving pain, without remembering the deeper why. But then there are the others, the rare ones, the ones who come back awake. They feel out of place in this world. They question things others accept. They carry a quiet depth, a knowing that can't be taught. They don't return to fit in. They return to remember. And in doing so, they start to shift the field around them, not by preaching, not by proving, but simply by being. Here's the quiet lesson in Tesla's view. You are not trapped in a loop. You are walking a path. And every time you choose love over fear, truth over ego, presence over performance, you move closer to what you came here to complete. And once you do, once you've remembered enough, the cycle no longer pulls you. Because at that point, you're no longer here to learn. You're here to lift. And that's where Tesla's vision leads next, to a soul that's no longer cycling through lifetimes, but becoming something even more powerful.
Not every soul crosses over with ease. Some linger, not because they're punished, but because they're still holding on. Nikola Tesla called this place the residue field, a vibrational layer that exists just outside the visible, still touching our world, but not fully part of it. He believed that when a soul is unable to release due to fear, guilt, resentment, or deep attachment, its energy doesn't rise, it remains, not as a ghost in the way Hollywood tells it, but as a fragment of consciousness looping, stuck in memory, stuck in feeling, stuck in the moment it couldn't let go. Tesla described it like this: energy does not vanish, it accumulates, and some souls, overwhelmed by unfinished emotions, become echoes inside the field. You've felt this before, haven't you? You walk into an old building and the air feels heavy. You visit a battlefield, a prison, or a hospital, and something clings to your skin like grief that isn't yours. That's not imagination. That's resonance. And according to Tesla, those places are not just haunted by history, they're saturated with it. Pain, especially when repeated over time, leaves more than scars. It leaves weight. And some souls, especially those who feared death or died suddenly or carried deep regret, may become entangled in that weight, not as demons, not as monsters, but as pieces of what once was, searching for peace they never found. Tesla warned that these trapped fields of energy are not evil, they're unresolved, and they can influence the living not through possession, but through emotional mimicry. He wrote this: "Some people carry sadness that never was theirs. They've simply become tuned to a frequency that doesn't belong in their story." And here's where the lesson begins. Not all haunting is from the dead. Some of it is our own disconnection. Because Tesla also believed you don't need to die to get stuck. Many people are already trapped, not in the afterlife, but in this one, living in loops of fear,
cycles of shame, patterns they didn't choose but repeat anyway. They've forgotten how to rise. They've forgotten what they are: light. But there is hope. Tesla believed that even the most stagnant field can shift when met with presence, with forgiveness, with love. He wrote this: "The field is not eternal. It responds to vibration, and sincere remembrance is the tuning fork that sets it free." That means the places that feel heavy can heal, and the souls that linger can move on. And sometimes they're not waiting to scare us. They're just waiting to be seen, acknowledged, released. Because love doesn't just lift the living, it liberates the lost. And this understanding takes us to a deeper truth, that not all souls who stay behind are trapped. Some remain by choice, not to haunt, but to guide.
We often imagine being trapped as something that happens after death, a soul unable to move on, caught between worlds. But Nikola Tesla saw something more sobering. He believed many people are already trapped while still alive, not in haunted houses, but in haunted hearts, haunted minds. He called it energetic paralysis, a state where your soul isn't moving forward, even though your body is. And the chains? They're made of fear, resentment, denial, and the weight of unlived truth. Tesla wrote, "The real danger is not dying. It's living disconnected, forgetting you are light, and mistaking your story for your identity." You've seen it before. The person who repeats the same toxic relationship again and again. The one who clings to a title or role even though it's slowly draining the joy out of them. The one who hasn't laughed in years. Not really, because somewhere along the line, they stopped being fully alive. Not physically, but energetically. Tesla believed that when you suppress your truth long enough, you begin to live inside a loop, like a spiritual holding pattern. Days blur, decisions feel hollow, and even moments of beauty feel muted. He didn't call this depression. He called it soul dissonance, when the frequency you live at doesn't match who you really are. And here's what makes it harder. The world rewards it. We're taught to wear masks, to perform, to keep going no matter what. But when you live that way long enough, you don't need a grave to feel buried. You're not lost, but you've forgotten how to feel found. And here's the quiet truth Tesla hinted at. You don't escape this trap by doing more. You escape it by remembering who you are. Not the version you show others, the version underneath it all. The one that still feels wonder, that still cries at sunsets, that still believes in something greater. Because being trapped isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence you carry when no one's watching. But if you can sense that silence, if you can feel the weight you didn't name, you're already waking up. And that's the first step, awareness. Tesla believed that once you become aware of your disconnection, you can begin to tune yourself back. Through presence, through truth, through choosing one small, honest moment at a time. Because freedom isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it begins with a breath. And here's the hope. Just as some souls get stuck, others come back to help us rise.
If fear is what keeps us stuck, then love, real, conscious, vibrational love, is what sets us free. Nikola Tesla believed that love wasn't just an emotion. It was a frequency, a living energy capable of shifting the most stagnant soul and dissolving even the densest of spiritual residue. But not the kind of love we often see in movies. Not attachment, not possession, not "I love you because you make me feel good." No, Tesla was talking about love as liberation. He once wrote, "True love is the only vibration that lifts without demanding, that heals without controlling, that frees without forgetting." To him, love was the highest frequency the soul could emit. And it didn't require words or grand gestures. It required intention. Tesla believed that when we focus love, not as sentiment, but as sincere energy toward a place, a memory, a person, or even a lingering soul, something shifts. He saw it in his lab. Rooms that felt heavy for weeks after someone passed would suddenly lighten after a quiet moment of prayer. Not a ritual, just stillness, just presence. He believed that intentional love acts like a tuning fork, breaking through fear, melting guilt, and helping energy rise. Think of it this way. If a soul is vibrating at a low frequency, shame, regret, resentment, then love is the only resonance strong enough to lift it. It's why people talk about feeling lighter after forgiving someone. It's why a moment of real connection can calm a child faster than logic ever could. Because love, real love, transcends words. It goes straight to the signal. And here's where it becomes deeply personal. You are not powerless in the face of suffering. Not yours, not anyone's. You don't need to be a healer, a psychic, or a priest. You just need to remember that your love, your presence, has weight. It has impact. Tesla believed that even the most forgotten souls could find release when met with genuine compassion. Even those who were stuck for years, decades, lifetimes. Because energy responds to energy. And the highest energy of all is love offered without agenda. Here's the quiet lesson. You can shift a room with your presence. You can shift a soul with your kindness. You can heal a space with your forgiveness, even if the person you're forgiving is no longer here. That's not poetic. That's vibrational physics. And sometimes, the most powerful work you'll ever do won't be seen. It will be felt. And it's in that stillness that something else becomes possible. Because once you've raised your own frequency, you begin to hear things others can't. Not with your ears, but with your soul.
Not everything that's real is measurable. At least, not yet. Nikola Tesla knew this, and he also knew it terrified those in power. Because when science begins to explore the invisible, it stops being a tool for control and starts becoming a path to freedom. Tesla believed that the soul, consciousness, and even love itself weren't mystical ideas. They were simply frequencies beyond the current reach of our instruments. He wrote, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." But here's the problem. That kind of science doesn't sell. It doesn't control. It doesn't keep people small, afraid, obedient. So instead of exploring it, they buried it. Not with malice, with design. Because if you can convince people that death is the end, that their soul isn't real, that love is just biology, and intuition is nonsense, you can control almost everything about them. How they work, how they vote, how they love, even how they fear. Tesla's ideas threatened all of that.
He dared to say that the soul might be measurable, that consciousness may exist outside the brain, that memory might not be stored in the body, but in a field that surrounds it. Sound familiar? Today, some quantum physicists, neurobiologists, and consciousness researchers are finally beginning to ask these same questions, but they do it quietly. Because the system doesn't reward curiosity, it rewards conformity. And yet the clues are everywhere. Experiments showing particles that change behavior when observed. The placebo effect, where belief heals better than medicine. Documented near-death experiences in patients with no brain activity. Tesla wasn't guessing. He was noticing. He was listening. But the world wasn't ready to hear. So his deeper work, the spiritual science behind his inventions, was dismissed, minimized, or simply erased. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too far. Because once you realize you're more than a body, you stop living in fear. You stop obeying out of habit. You start listening to yourself. And a person like that can't be bought, can't be silenced, can't be controlled. And that's the kind of human Tesla hoped would emerge from his forgotten research. Not someone who worships science blindly, but someone who uses it to explore what really matters. So here's the quiet lesson. The most important frontier isn't outer space, it's inner space. It's the vibration of your being. It's the field of awareness behind your eyes. It's the knowing that you've always carried, but were told to ignore. Tesla didn't want to build a new religion. He wanted to build a bridge between the measurable and the meaningful, between the lab and the soul. And he knew that once you start walking that bridge, you don't go back. You start seeing everything differently, especially yourself. And that brings us to the next step on this journey. If you really are more than your thoughts, more than your name, more than your past, then who are you when you finally stop playing the role?
Nikola Tesla once said, "Most people are so absorbed in the illusion they forget they are the light behind it." And that's where the great divide begins, between those who sleep through life and those who slowly start to remember. Tesla didn't judge the sleepwalkers. He understood them, because we've all been there. Going through the motions, chasing things we're told will bring us happiness, titles, status, approval, ignoring that quiet ache inside that says, "This isn't who I really am." A sleepwalker isn't someone who's lazy. They're someone who's lost, disconnected, performing a role so well they've forgotten it's a performance. You see it every day, people glued to routines they no longer enjoy, reacting instead of creating, afraid to stop, because if they do, they might hear the silence underneath. And yet, some people do stop. They slow down. They feel more. They start to notice the patterns not just around them, but within them. Those are the rememberers. They don't have all the answers, but they've stopped pretending they don't feel the questions. They're the ones who ask, "Why am I here? What have I forgotten? What part of myself have I left behind to survive?" They often feel like outsiders, too sensitive, too quiet, too awake in a world addicted to noise. Tesla believed that the rememberers weren't better, just tuned differently. Their souls vibrate on a higher frequency, not because of superiority, but because they've touched something true. And here's the twist. They often carry pain, deep, old pain, not just from this life, but from many. Because remembering isn't easy.
It means feeling what the world has taught you to numb. It means walking away from roles that kept you safe. It means choosing truth over comfort. But that's also where the light comes in. Because when you remember who you are, you start waking up others without even trying. Tesla wrote, "One awakened soul is worth 1,000 who sleep." Not because they preach, not because they convince, but because they resonate. Their energy reminds people of something long forgotten, a frequency beneath the noise, a stillness behind the story. And here's the lesson. You can shift from sleepwalker to rememberer at any time. It doesn't take a crisis, or a guru, or a mystical experience. It starts when you stop running and start listening, when you stop performing and start becoming. Tesla believed the world didn't need more inventions. It needed more rememberers. People who would walk quietly through chaos, carrying a signal so pure that others couldn't help but feel it. And when enough of us remember, the illusion breaks and the truth begins to rise. So ask yourself, which one are you? And more importantly, which one are you becoming? Because when you begin to remember, you start hearing a new kind of signal, one that's been waiting patiently in the silence.
Not everyone was born to blend in. Some were born to wake up, and in doing so, wake others. Nikola Tesla believed that certain souls carry a different kind of light, not a light of performance, but of remembrance. He wrote, "We are not here to become. We are here to remember what we are beneath the forgetting." In that remembering, it doesn't look like perfection. It often looks like disruption. Because when light enters a room, it doesn't quietly ask permission. It illuminates, it exposes, and it invites change. But the world doesn't always like that. You've probably felt it. That moment when you spoke the truth and people turned away. When you said no, firm but kind, and suddenly you were difficult. When your honesty was mistaken for rebellion. It's not because you were wrong. It's because you weren't playing the part anymore. Tesla understood this deeply. He walked alone most of his life, not because he couldn't belong, but because he refused to betray what he knew. He saw the world chasing comfort, conformity, control, and he chose clarity instead. Because light doesn't come to keep the illusion going. It comes to break it. And those who carry that light, who dare to live from the soul, not the script, often feel the cost, but they also carry the key. Here's the quiet truth. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in, it might be because you're not meant to. You weren't sent here to agree with everything. You were sent here to remember something deeper and to live as a mirror for others who've forgotten too. You don't need to prove your light. You just need to honor it. That means saying no when your soul says no, choosing presence over performance, speaking what's true, even if your voice trembles, creating beauty, even when the world is distracted by noise. Because the more you live in alignment with that inner light, the more others begin to see it in themselves. And that's the ripple. Not a revolution of shouting, but a quiet wave of remembering, soul by soul, light by light. You weren't meant to follow a path someone else made. You were meant to walk your own, and in doing so, leave footprints others didn't know were possible. Tesla believed the soul doesn't evolve by conforming. It evolves by returning, again and again, to the center of who it truly is.
So if you feel different, you're not lost, you're lit. And your job isn't to explain that light. It's simply to walk in it. Because as more of us remember, something begins to shift, not just within us, but in the field itself. And when enough souls awaken, the signal gets louder, which brings us to a powerful turning point in Tesla's vision. What happens when a soul no longer needs to return? When it becomes pure resonance, no longer reactive, no longer bound, but a guide for others.
We tend to think revolutions are loud, that they begin with crowds, with shouts, with fire in the streets. But Nikola Tesla believed the most powerful revolution doesn't happen outside. It begins in silence. It begins with resonance. He wrote, "Change does not start in noise. It begins in vibration. And when the vibration is true, the world has no choice but to respond." Tesla saw the future not as a war of weapons, but as a shift in frequency. He believed that when enough souls remember who they are, the system built on fear begins to dissolve without a fight. Because systems of control rely on people staying asleep, staying afraid, staying small. But when one person wakes up, truly, deeply, something happens in the field. Their energy shifts. Their presence becomes stronger than their words. And everyone around them feels it, even if they don't know why. It's why some people enter a room and everything gets calmer, or clearer, or more honest. That's resonance, and it spreads. Tesla believed the soul doesn't change the world by force, but by frequency. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to shout, argue, or demand. You just need to remember who you are, and then live in alignment with that. And suddenly, your presence begins doing what your voice never could. Think of it like tuning forks. When one starts vibrating at a high frequency, others nearby begin to match it automatically, not through effort, through resonance. This is how real change begins, not through control, but through coherence. Tesla's revolution was never about rebellion. It was about realignment. Back to truth, back to soul, back to light. So what does that look like in daily life? It looks like choosing compassion over judgment, stillness over reaction, truth over convenience, love over fear, again and again. It looks like someone who's had every reason to stay angry, but chooses peace. It looks like someone who's walked through darkness, but carries light anyway. It looks like you when you stop chasing validation and start living from your inner knowing. That is the revolution. And it's already happening, quietly, globally, soul by soul. And once you begin living from that space, you realize something extraordinary. You're not alone, because others are waking up too. And together, your resonance becomes louder than fear, more magnetic than control, and stronger than any system trying to keep you asleep. And that takes us to Tesla's final truth. Not about science, not about invention, but about the reason you're here. Because all of this remembering, all of this awakening, isn't just for knowledge. It's so that you can become the one you've been waiting for.
Some truths don't arrive with thunder. They arrive like a whisper, soft, familiar, and impossibly ancient. And when you hear it, not with your ears, but with something deeper, you don't say, "That's new." You say, "I remember." Because the signal has always been there. We just forgot how to tune in.
Throughout this journey, we've explored what Tesla was never allowed to say out loud, that death is not the end, that the soul is not myth, and that love is not weakness. We've uncovered the idea that what you are is energy, conscious, vibrating, endlessly becoming. And now, the question is no longer, is it true? The question is, what will you do with it? Because remembering is not the final step. It's the first. It's easy to forget in a world full of distractions. We're taught to perform, to conform, to follow scripts that don't fit. And somewhere along the way, the soul gets quiet. Not gone, just waiting. But the signal never stops. It hums in moments of stillness. It flickers behind the eyes of a stranger. It echoes in dreams that feel more real than waking life. And now, you've heard it again. Maybe it came as a chill, or a lump in your throat, or a strange sense of, I've always known this. Don't rush past that, because that's where it begins. Not in changing your whole life overnight, but in choosing presence one breath at a time. Not in shouting your truth, but in living it quietly, consistently, and with love. You don't have to become something new. You only have to remember what you are. Light, awareness, frequency, a soul wearing a name. And you're not alone. There are others like you, listening, awakening, resonating. And as each of us remembers, we begin to lift the field together. Tesla didn't want followers, he wanted listeners. Not blind believers, but brave rememberers. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're one of them. So ask yourself, not with your mind, but with your being, are you ready to remember? Are you ready to become the signal for someone else still searching in the dark? Because the silence is ending, the illusion is cracking, and the soul is starting to sing again. If this message stirred something in you, leave a comment below with just 3 words, I remember now. And if you know someone who's been quietly searching, someone who's felt different their whole life, share this with them. Because maybe they're not lost. Maybe they're just waiting for the signal too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. And until next time, stay connected, stay present, and keep tuning in. The signal is returning. Are you listening?